Hello guys, welcome to another episode in this Mercedes Sprinter van conversion. In today's episode we're going to be finishing off that kitchen, and in particular we're going to be fitting that wooden worktop. Loads of you got that right who guessed what type of wood we were using. It was bamboo. This was always going to be one part of the build that we were going to leave right to the end. Because our kitchen unit goes across that side sliding door, it's limiting the access to the vehicle, so in order to give me more space to build the bench and the shower unit and so forth, I left it out right until the end, and it was always going to be the last thing that we fitted. So let's jump into the workshop and unwrap that worktop. So it's time to fit the kitchen countertop. Those of you that will remember a few videos ago I asked you the question on what top we were using. Loads of you guessed right. We've actually gone for bamboo. I think you can see here these little knuckle marks, typical of bamboo. This is obviously a lot of bamboo, it's all been laminated together, and then on this front edge you might be able to see there's blocks of bamboo being stuck together to make the core of the board. Obviously that'll all come up really nice once we put an oil finish on it. It will really bring up this grain and it will look really beautiful. What I've done initially, this piece of worktop was 2.2 meters long, so it was a lot longer than we actually needed, and it was also 600 millimeters wide, or 2 foot wide. So initially I've cut about 50 mil off the width all the way down, so I've made it 550 wide, and I've also cut about 2 or 3 feet off the length of it just to make it 1400 long, so it just overhangs by about 25 mil or 1 inch over the end here. Now what we've got to do is we've got to mark the cutout for the oven and hob, and obviously the cutout for the kitchen sink. I've made sure that the front of the countertop is square to the cabinets, so I've got a 40 mil overhang here to the front of the cabinets, and I've got a 40 mil overhang here to the front of the cabinets. So the front of the worktop is square to the front of the units. It's also square along this edge, but as you can see it runs out a little bit on the back wall. And then obviously we've got to cut around this door post as well. Now at the end I just want a 20 mil overhang here, so I want this whole worktop to be pushed back to the wall by 20 millimeters, and then that will leave me with a 20 mil overhang at the front, which corresponds to the overhang on the cooker. So the front of the worktop will actually run flush with the front of the hob. So in order to do that we need to make a 20 millimeter scribe, and then what we can do is run that 20 millimeter scribe along this back wall. That will match this profile. As you can see it's slightly wider here than it is here, so we'll end up cutting more off here and not so much here, but then when it's pushed back that will make a nice neat line there. We have got a splashback to go on this wall anyway, which will come down over the top of the work surface, so even if it's not a dead accurate line it doesn't matter too much, it will be covered by the splashback. Similarly, if we was tiling, the tiles would go down over the worktop as well. Or if you've got a finished wooden surface here and you want to get a neat finish but you've got a rough edge there, you could always come back in with a little bit of quarter round beading and just put a little beading there, or even just run a little bead of mastic along there to conceal those joins. So don't worry if it's, you don't have to be too super critical with these joint lines. There are ways of concealing it and still making it look neat and tidy. You've seen me do this before, but first of all I'm going to make myself a little scribe, with a bit of wood and a pencil, which will give me that exact 20mm distance, and then we'll run the scribe along that edge. This is our shop bought scribe, but it has a couple of limitations. If I put a pencil in there, I can only move it up to that point. I can't move it any further, and this distance is actually more than what we need. You can remove the pencil, slide it beyond the point and use this point, but again this distance is now too small, so we need to make our own scribe, but it's really simple to do. I've just taken a scrap of wood, I've just cut a nice point on it on the mitre saw, and then all we need to do now is measure back from the point 20mm, make a mark there, and then what we'll do is we'll drill a hole big enough to accept this pencil. Then we can insert our pencil into our scribe. Now that should measure 20mm from the tip of the pencil to the tip of the scribe. The key when you're scribing is to keep your scribe parallel to this face here, and when you're scribing along the wall you want to keep that parallel all the way along. You don't want to be at an angle like this or this, because it won't give you a true scribe of that wall. So holding the scribe against the back wall parallel to this face, and then what we'll do, keeping it parallel still, we'll just trace around this door pillar. Whoops. Come in from the other side. So there's the line that we've scribed. You can see we've got to cut a reasonable bit of wood off the back here, but then as we come down you can see that line tapering away. We don't actually need to cut very much away at this end. We've obviously then got to cut around this door post, and I'm also going to take a little bit of a notch out for the door rubber as well. And then once we've removed all this wood, the whole unit should slide back 20mm and then give me that 20mm overhang on the front. I'm going to be trimming the edge of this kitchen unit with a jigsaw, because there are some little curves that I need to do around that door post. We spoke previously about the section of jigsaw blades. Normally jigsaw blades have the teeth pointing upwards and they cut in an upwards direction, because that pulls the jigsaw down to the workpiece and it makes it safer to use. Your jigsaw won't jump around as much. But I actually want to use a saw with the teeth pointing downwards, so it cuts in a downwards direction. The reason for that is because I'm cutting on the face of the unit, and I want any chip out, if there is going to be any, to be on the underside where it's not seen, and I want the top surface cut to be really nice and clean. So I've chosen this downward cutting blade. Whenever you're using a jigsaw, it's always good advice to wear safety glasses, because they do have a tendency to throw the chips about. With these bits, like the piece around the door pillar that I've got to cut out, there's some quite tight little curves here, and you'll never get a jigsaw blade around that sort of tight radius, so I'm just going to nibble away some little bits here. I won't go anywhere near the line, and then we'll have to come back in with a file and just tidy that up with a file afterwards. Round that little piece off there with a file. I've marked up the cutout for the oven and hob on this masking tape on the top surface, I know a lot of people would use a circular saw to make these cuts, but I find the circular saw really burns the wood, and then you have to spend ages sanding all those burn marks out. I get a much nicer and cleaner cut with a jigsaw. It's personal preference, but I find it easier to use a jigsaw, and with a nice decent sharp blade you can get a pretty good clean cut. I'm going to drill a hole in this back corner first, and I can get my jigsaw blade in there. I've just clamped a bit of scrap wood on the underside just to minimise any tear out. Okay, so the counter fits nicely in the van now. We've got all the right overhangs on the front edge. It's nice and square to the cabinets, and the oven and hob just slides in from the front. It's got a small flange on 3 sides, so it will cover that cut edge. And then next to that we've got the template for the Thetford sink. They've kind of given us a paper template, and then ideally it's best to have a minimum of at least 100mm of countertop between your appliances and 100mm at the end if you've got it, because otherwise you lose quite a bit of strength if you cut too much wood away. I've drilled another pilot hole in the sink, and I'm just going to cut out this oval shape with the jigsaw. That's the sink hole cut out. It was tough where you've got these knots in the bamboo. Obviously the wood's hard anyway, but it's really tough where the knots were, and the saw was struggling a little bit, but that's come out quite clean. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. That's a cutout for the oven done, and the cutout for the sink. There's definitely those knots in the bamboo that were fighting the saw. They're really hard to cut through. But take it slowly and the job's a good one. There you can see now we've scribed that back in. You can see how well that fits around the door rubber, around the door pillar, and then there's a nice even, just small gap at the back there and down the side. Where the kitchen cutout is, obviously these horizontal braces of the carcass underneath, they're going to have to be cut out as well. So I've just penciled round there and penciled round this front brace, and then we'll cut those out with a jigsaw as well, and then the bowl can just drop straight in there. Tidy that up with a bit of sandpaper, and then what I may do is put a batten across the back here just to strengthen this piece. We're just setting out the sink and tap locations. This is the sink that we're going with. I've just laid that in there temporarily, and obviously we've got to make sure that the tap position doesn't hinder this lift up lid. This is the tap that we're going with. It's a hot and cold mixer tap, and it's also got this hose attachment that pulls out on a weight. So ideally I want this to be situated here with the handle facing forwards. That's obviously not going to hinder the lid at all. And then this spout does swivel. It's quite stiff, but it will swivel across, and then obviously then you can use the hose to rinse. So just set a location here where that's not going to hinder the operation of the sink, and this is where I'm going to drill a 32mm hole for this tap. And then on the other side of the sink we've got our little drinking water tap, which we're just going to position that there, and again it's going to be out of the way of the lid, and then this little spout just swivels across when you want to use it. So we've got a smaller hole to drill here for the water hose connection and the electric cable for this tap. We're just cutting the hole for the tap, I've put it in my little bench drill just so it's nice and vertical. If we was to cut it with the normal drill, it could go off at an angle, and then that'll mean that the tap's going to be on an angle. With these hole saws, you just have to take it a little bit slowly, keep cleaning the teeth out because they do get a bit clogged up, and just take it a little bit at a time. And with the depth of this, we will have to drill from both sides because this won't go all the way through in one go. Changed it around, we've got to drill the hole for the little drinking water tap. I've switched the drill bit out for a little smaller Forstner bit because we don't need as big a hole for this tap. We're going to drill one hole for the hose and a smaller hole for the two little cables. So there we go guys, the holes are cut for the two taps. We've just mocked it up so you can get an idea what it's going to look like in the van. So we've got our main mixer tap which will have running hot and cold water, and then a smaller little tap on the right hand side is just going to be for our drinking water. I've just run the router with a roundover bit along the edge of one of these bits of scrap and just rounded over these corners, and I think it sort of emphasises this end grain a little bit more, and obviously it makes these corners a lot more tactile to the touch. So I'm going to run the edge of all of the fronts of the work surface with this router. I've got a little bit of a 1/4 inch roundover bit showing riding on a ball bearing, similar to what we've done in the past. And I'm just going to run these front edges. Tell you what, I really like the name of the company that makes this bamboo worktop. Kit+Kaboodle. Kit+Kaboodle Kitchens. What we're using to protect our bamboo worktops is this Osmo top oil. It's the best thing to use on a natural wood worktop. It's food safe. It's made from natural plant oils and waxes. And what we're going to do is put 2 coats on. The first coat will soak straight into the wood, so we're probably going to use a brush or a roller to apply that so we can get a decent amount of oil on initially. We'll leave that to dry, and then the second coat will apply to everything again, but we'll apply that with a lint-free cloth and give it a little bit of a polish. And then the third coat we'll put on when the worktop's actually in position in the van. This natural oil will protect against any spillages like tea, coffee, coke, milk, water, and it will really make the worktop last for a long time. It's best to apply the oil in a well ventilated area and where it's nice and warm. We've left the oil in a warm place at 23 degrees indoors overnight. Obviously because it's got a wax in it, it needs to be fairly liquid, so you can't really apply this in cold conditions, and also it will dry quicker when it's in the warm as well. So we're going to do it here in the workshop. To make sure that you shake the tin well, just to make sure it's properly mixed before you use it. And then initially we'll just apply a fairly generous coat because I know the wood in its natural state will soak it up quite well. This should bring out all that lovely bamboo grain as well. With that first coat of top oil, you need to apply it with a brush or a roller, because when the wood's in its natural state, it's like a sponge. It's just going to soak up loads of oil. So you need to put a decent amount on that first coat. And then with the second coat, we don't need to apply it with a roller or a brush. What we need is a lint-free cloth, like these cotton rags. Like an old cotton t-shirt or something like that would be perfect. And then what we'll do is we'll just dip the rag in the oil and just apply a thin coat in the direction of the grain. I'm just going to put this little bit of wadding inside here. And then just make like a little ball like that. And then that's what I'm going to use to put the polish on with. Oil rather, sorry. And then just rub it in the direction of the grain. What this is also doing is effectively sort of polishing the top, and you'll end up with a really nice smooth finish. Don't need a lot on this second coat, and just work it in. You can see the difference. That's already dried in, that's had 24 hours to dry that side. And now this is the fresh side. And then what we'll do, we'll give it another 24 hours to dry. And then once it's had these two coats, it can then go in the van. It's a good idea to just do every side, you know, top, bottom and all the sides out of the van to give it loads of protection. This is a water repellent, this oil. So if you do have any spillages on your top, this will make sure that it doesn't seep into the wood, and it will give it years of protection. And it will really make this top look really lovely. There we go, we'll do the sides, I'll flip it over and do the other side, and then we'll leave that to dry. We're just about to install the kitchen worktop now into the van. I've put some of these little furniture blocks on the back edge, on the underside of the kitchen worktop, especially here where the oven's going to be, because this bit hasn't got a cupboard underneath it, and obviously it's got the weight of the oven on it, so I just want to give it plenty of support on this little piece at the back here, which is fairly thin. Although this countertop's really strong, I just want to give it a little bit of extra support. So these are going to be screwed to the side wall of the van onto that ply lining. The oven sits on the worktop with this little flange here, but there's also a screw in each corner just to stop it sliding backwards and forwards. I'm just going to drill a pilot hole because this bamboo is really tough, and then we'll pop a screw in. I've got these little black panhead screws. They should look nice with the oven. And I always like to leave all my screws with the slot in the vertical position, and then they all look nice and neat. This sink comes with a little rubber sealing strip to go around the edge to make it watertight to the countertop, but it's really fiddly to get on, and then once you think you've got it on, it just peels off again, so it's a bit of a pain, to be honest, but hopefully we can get it on there, it will stay on there and we can get it in place. So there we go, quite a compact kitchen area, well provisioned with appliances, really nice quality finish. So that's all the major build elements of our van complete. I'm really pleased how that kitchen's come together. I really love that bamboo worktop, that really does finish it off beautifully. And I think those appliances with the oven and sink and the little compressor fridge, they're going to be just like a home from home really. You know, we're going to have everything that we need there. Now what we've got to do is take a load of photographs of the van. There's a few things that are required to change the registration of the vehicle from a panel van to a motor caravan. I'm going to be covering that in a separate video. There's a lot of help on the government's website. They tell you exactly what you need, what photographs you need to take, and there's even a covering letter that you can download and fill in. So in the next video we'll be running through all of that re-registration process. We can send off the V5 logbook, and then hopefully in a week or so we'll get that back, and then we'll be able to change all the insurances. I'm also going to get the van MOT'd just to give us a full 12 months while we're out in Europe. You know, when I started this van conversion, I've never done anything like this before. I've done a little bit of home DIY, but I never thought that I could actually turn something out with such a professional finish as this. So I hope it's given you guys loads of inspiration and a bit of confidence to know that maybe you could turn out a van just as good as mine. And I hope these videos have been really super helpful to you. If you think there's other people that may benefit from these videos, then please do share them on social media. If there's somebody else out there that's looking for advice and you think one of my videos could help them, then please do share a link. I'd really appreciate that. As always, if you've got any questions on any part of the build, please do leave me a comment below and I'll try and come back to you as quickly as I can. Just want to say a massive thank you to everybody for all of your support, the fantastic comments that I've had through this whole build process. And I really do hope that you continue to follow me as we go on our tour. There's going to be loads more videos that we're going to put out on loads of different aspects of living in the van full time. So please do make sure that you're subscribed and hit that little bell symbol. You'll get a notification as soon as I upload the next video. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Cheers.